Marriage is a promise. A vision of a shared future built on love, trust, and companionship. In the beginning, everything feels effortless. Conversations flow. Laughter comes easily. And every small gesture carries meaning. The warmth of love is felt in simple things, the way he looks at her across the dinner table, the spontaneous embrace after a long day, the whispered goodnights that feel like silent affirmations of devotion. These moments, once abundant, become the foundation of a life together. But something changes. Not suddenly, not dramatically, but gradually, so subtly that neither partner notices until the silence between them feels heavier than words. A wife who once felt cherished, adored, and deeply connected to her husband begins to feel distant, as if they are living parallel lives under the same roof. The shared laughter grows quieter. The meaningful conversations become rare. And the spark that once defined their love slowly dims into an unspoken indifference. She still cares. Of course, he is the father of her children, her partner in life, but something fundamental has shifted. And she wonders, perhaps for the first time, is this how it's supposed to feel? This isn't the result of a single argument or a dramatic betrayal. It's not about falling out of love in the way movies portray it, messy, passionate, explosive. No. This is something far more insidious. Something that creeps in unnoticed over years. It's the slow accumulation of unspoken frustrations, unmet emotional needs, and overlooked moments that eventually tip the balance from affection to detachment. It's the realization that she has been carrying the weight of emotional labor in their marriage. Remembering the anniversaries, planning the vacations, managing the household logistics, all while feeling unseen. It's the frustration of repeating the same concerns only to have them dismissed or ignored. It's the deep loneliness that comes from lying next to someone every night and feeling worlds apart. And yet, when she looks at him, she doesn't see a bad person. She sees the man she once loved deeply. The man she still wants to feel close to. But she no longer knows how to bridge the distance that has formed between them. She no longer knows if he even notices the void that she feels so clearly. But why does this happen? Is this the inevitable fate of all long-term relationships? Does love simply fade with time? Worn down by the weight of daily life, responsibilities, and routine? Or is there something deeper at play, something practical, psychological, and perhaps even spiritual? The truth is, most couples don't talk about this. They don't sit down and dissect the slow erosion of connection. Instead, they adapt. They tolerate. They settle into an unspoken understanding that this is just how marriage works. But does it have to be this way? Is there a way to reignite love? To restore the intimacy that has been lost? And to truly see and appreciate each other again? In today's discussion, we are not just going to explore why women, over time, start feeling disconnected from their husbands. We are going to look at what can be done about it. And to do that, we will turn to a source of wisdom that has guided people for centuries, Buddhist philosophy. Buddhism teaches us that suffering arises when we resist the natural flow of life, when we cling to expectations that no longer serve us, and when we fail to be fully present with those we love. Through mindfulness, compassion, and conscious effort, relationships can be transformed. Love doesn't have to be a fleeting emotion, it can be a daily practice, something that grows deeper with time rather than fading away. So if you've ever looked at your marriage and wondered where the spark went, if you've ever felt unseen, unappreciated, or emotionally disconnected, stay with me. Because what we're about to explore may change the way you see love, aging, and marriage forever. 1. The burden of emotional labor. She wakes up before everyone else, moving through the quiet house like a steady pulse that keeps everything in rhythm. The morning begins with a mental checklist: what needs to be packed for the kids, which bills need to be paid, whose birthday is coming up, whether her husband remembered to call his mother like he promised last week. By the time everyone is up, dressed, and moving through their day, she has already orchestrated a symphony of details no one even notices. Not because they don't care, but because they have always counted on her to handle it. It wasn't always like this. In the early days of their marriage, she loved being the one who made things special. She took pride in planning surprises, in remembering little details that made their home feel warm and inviting. She knew his favorite meal, the way he liked his coffee, the books he wanted to read but never got around to buying. And she was happy to take on these roles, believing that love is expressed in small, thoughtful gestures. But over time, something shifted. The small gestures turned into unspoken expectations. The responsibility of keeping everything running smoothly became hers alone. She was no longer just making life easier, she was carrying it, while he relaxed on the couch after work, unaware of the mental load she bore. She moved through the house picking up toys, folding laundry, making grocery lists in her head. At first, she brushed it off. He was tired. He worked hard. But so did she. The difference was, no one noticed her exhaustion. And so, resentment begins to form, not because she doesn't love him, but because love should feel lighter than this. It should feel shared. She waits for him to notice, to offer help without being asked, to say, "I see you. I appreciate everything you do." But that moment never comes. Not because he is cruel or uncaring, but because he simply doesn't see what has become invisible labor. This is the silent burden of emotional caretaking. It is not just about chores, it is about the unseen effort of holding everything together, remembering the appointments, checking in on the kids' emotions, keeping track of family dynamics, ensuring that holidays feel magical, holding space for everyone's feelings, offering comfort when needed, and sacrificing her own needs in the process. It is the weight of always being available while rarely feeling reciprocated. And the hardest part, many men do not even realize it is happening. They assume that if their wives are not explicitly asking for help, everything must be fine. But the absence of complaints does not mean the absence of struggle. Women often internalize their exhaustion, convincing themselves that asking for help is just another task on their list, one that will likely lead to disappointment when their requests go ignored or forgotten. Buddhism teaches that suffering, or dukkha, is an inherent part of life. The first noble truth acknowledges that suffering is unavoidable, while the second noble truth explains that suffering often arises from attachment, especially to expectations. Many women expect their husbands to naturally see and appreciate their efforts, to recognize the invisible work they do without needing to be reminded. But attachment to this expectation leads to disappointment. And over time, disappointment turns into quiet resentment. The kind that does not explode in arguments but instead erodes intimacy, turning love into obligation. Letting go, in the Buddhist sense, does not mean accepting an unfair dynamic or resigning oneself to a lifetime of exhaustion. Instead, it means recognizing what is within our control and what is not. Upekkha, or equanimity, teaches us that true peace comes from reducing attachment to external validation. A woman may never hear the words she longs for, thank you for everything you do, but she can begin to communicate her needs openly instead of assuming they will be understood. Communication is the bridge between expectation and understanding. It is easy to assume that a partner should know how much effort goes into managing a household. But the reality is, many men have been conditioned to overlook this labor. A conversation, held with clarity rather than frustration, can be transformative. Instead of waiting for appreciation to come unprompted, a woman can say, "I need us to share this responsibility more equally. I feel overwhelmed. And I want to feel like we're in this together." It is not a complaint, but a request for partnership. For husbands, practicing sati, or mindfulness, can help break years of unconscious conditioning. It means being present enough to notice when the dishes are piling up, when the children need attention, when their wife looks exhausted but is still pushing through the day. It means stepping in before being asked. Recognizing that love is not just about grand gestures, but about the everyday moments of showing up. In the end, marriage is a shared journey, not a weight one person should carry alone. Love should not be measured by how much one is willing to endure, but by how much both are willing to contribute. And when the burden of emotional labor is acknowledged and shared, something beautiful happens. Love begins to feel like love again, not like work. 2. Lack of meaningful communication. In the beginning, words flowed effortlessly between them. Conversations stretched late into the night, filled with laughter, shared secrets, and whispered dreams. They spoke about everything: their childhoods, their fears, their ambitions. Each exchange deepened their bond, creating a sense of connection so strong that silence felt almost unnecessary. They could read each other's moods, sense unspoken emotions, and find comfort in the knowledge that their partner was truly listening. But over time, those conversations began to shrink. Not all at once, but gradually, in small, imperceptible ways. The questions became routine. How was your day? What's for dinner? The responses became predictable. Fine? Nothing special. And then, one day, she realized something. She couldn't remember the last time they had truly talked. Not just exchanged words, but really connected, like they used to. The silence between them was no longer comfortable, it was heavy, filled with unspoken thoughts and emotions that had no place to go. She tried to bridge the gap, asking about his day with genuine curiosity, hoping to spark something more. But his responses were brief, distracted. His attention was on his phone, the TV, or the endless thoughts running through his mind. At first, she gave him the benefit of the doubt. Maybe he was tired. Maybe work was stressful. But as the pattern repeated, she felt something shift inside her. Not anger, not even frustration, just a quiet sadness. A realization that she was becoming invisible in the very relationship where she once felt most seen. It wasn't about needing constant validation. It wasn't about expecting long, poetic conversations every night. It was about feeling heard, feeling valued, feeling like she mattered beyond the roles she played: wife, mother, caretaker. She longed for the man who once hung onto her every word, who was eager to share his own thoughts, who saw her as more than just a presence in the house but as a person with dreams, opinions, and emotions. Many men do not realize how much emotional intimacy matters to their wives. They assume that as long as there is no major conflict, everything is fine. They mistake peaceful coexistence for connection. But for a woman, silence is not always neutral, it can be lonely. A lack of deep communication does not just create distance, it erodes the foundation of love itself. The Buddha taught that words have power, not just the words we speak, but also the ones we fail to say. Right speech, Samabhaka, is not just about avoiding harsh language, it is about using words to nurture understanding, to bring closeness rather than distance. In many marriages, the problem is not what is said, but what is left unsaid, the unexpressed gratitude, the unspoken concerns, the emotions that get buried beneath routine. A marriage does not wither because of one loud argument, it withers because of years of silence where love was never reaffirmed, where appreciation was never spoken, where thoughts and emotions were held back rather than shared. But this silence does not have to be permanent. Mindful communication is a choice, an intentional effort to bring depth back into the conversations that once felt effortless. It begins with presence, true, undistracted presence. It means putting the phone down, turning off distractions, and making eye contact. It means listening not just to respond, but to truly hear. It means asking questions with genuine interest, not just how was your day, but what was the best part of your day? What challenged you today? What's been on your mind lately? It also means opening up, allowing vulnerability to replace small talk. Many husbands withdraw from deep conversations, not because they do not care, but because they fear they will not have the right words. They worry about saying the wrong thing, about not being able to solve their wife's problems. But sometimes, a woman does not need solutions, she just needs presence. She needs to feel like her emotions are safe to express, that what she says matters. Avoiding dismissive or distracted responses is crucial. It might seem harmless when a husband half listens while scrolling through his phone, offering only a distracted yeah or aha. But over time, these small moments accumulate into something larger, a feeling that she no longer holds his attention, that her words no longer have weight, that she is talking, but no one is really listening. On the other hand, responding with kindness and engagement can transform even the simplest conversations into moments of connection. A sincere, "Tell me more about that," or "That sounds really tough, how are you feeling?" can make all the difference. It is not about having the perfect response, it is about showing that you care enough to be fully present. Setting aside dedicated time for meaningful conversations can also help break the cycle of surface-level exchanges. In the early years, deep talks happened naturally, often late at night, when time seemed endless. Now, with responsibilities piling up, those moments must be created intentionally. It does not have to be complicated, a walk together, a quiet dinner without distractions, a few minutes before bed spent reconnecting rather than scrolling through notifications. The effort itself sends a message: I want to know you. I want to understand you. I still care. The beauty of communication is that it is never too late to change. A couple who has spent years speaking only in routines can begin again. The first deep conversation might feel unfamiliar, even awkward, like flexing a muscle that has not been used in a long time. But with practice, it becomes natural again. A woman does not withdraw from her husband because she no longer loves him. She withdraws because she no longer feels loved in the way that matters most to her. And often, that love is not measured in gifts or grand gestures, it is measured in words. In the simple act of being heard. A marriage that lacks meaningful communication does not need more words. It needs more presence, more intention, more willingness to truly see and hear each other. When that happens, The silence that once felt like distance transforms into a space where love can breathe again. 3. The never-ending burden of housework. The dishes in the sink are not just dishes. The unfolded laundry on the couch is not just laundry. The cluttered kitchen. The dust on the shelves. The overflowing trash can, none of these are just chores. They are symbols. Silent markers of an imbalance that has built up over years. Maybe decades. At first, she didn't mind. She picked up the slack, assuming it was temporary, that he would eventually notice, that fairness would naturally fall into place. But time passed, and the pattern remained. Somewhere along the way, she became the one who carried it all. It happens so subtly that even she doesn't notice at first. In the beginning, she takes on tasks because she cares. She wants to make their home warm, inviting, a place of comfort. She cooks the meals he loves. She makes sure there are clean clothes in his drawer. She wipes the counters and straightens the pillows. It is an act of love, of devotion. But as the years go by, something shifts. What was once freely given starts to feel expected. The effort she puts in is no longer noticed, no longer appreciated, it simply blends into the background. And then, one day, she looks around and realizes she is exhausted. Not just physically, but emotionally. She starts to wonder, why am I the only one who sees these things? Why do I have to do everything? It's not that he never helps. He takes out the trash occasionally. He fixes things when they break. He mows the lawn. But those tasks are occasional, defined, and, most importantly, visible. Her work, on the other hand, is endless and unseen. It is the work of noticing the crumbs on the counter, the socks left on the floor, the dust collecting on the bookshelf. It is the work of keeping track, who needs a doctor's appointment, whose birthday is coming up, what's running low in the fridge. It is the work of remembering how she folds the towels a certain way, how she buys his favorite coffee without him asking, how she makes sure the house runs smoothly so he never has to think about it. And after years of carrying this invisible burden, she starts to feel something she never expected, resentment. Not because she wants him to suffer, not because she wants to stop caring, but because love is supposed to be shared. And right now, it feels one-sided. Many men do not realize this imbalance exists. They assume that because their wives are managing the home so well, they must be okay with it. They do not see the exhaustion building beneath the surface. The quiet frustration growing with every unwashed dish, every undone chore that falls on her shoulders. And when she finally speaks up, when she finally says, "I need help," it is often met with confusion. "Just ask," he says. "I'm happy to help." But that's the thing, she doesn't want to have to ask. She doesn't want to be the household manager, the one who assigns tasks like a boss delegating work. She wants a partner. Someone who sees what needs to be done and does it without waiting to be told. Because the burden is not just in the doing, it is in the knowing, the noticing, the never-ending mental checklist that runs through her mind while he gets to exist without it. Buddhism teaches that attachment to roles, to expectations, to fairness as we imagine it, can be a source of suffering. Metta, or loving kindness, reminds us that relationships flourish when they are built on compassion rather than frustration. When resentment starts to build, the answer is not in keeping score, in measuring who does what and how often. The answer is in letting go of ego, atta, and embracing housework not as a burden, but as an act of love. But love must go both ways. A woman should not have to practice endless patience while her partner remains unaware. True partnership requires awareness, effort, and gratitude. A husband who truly loves his wife does not wait to be asked, he sees. He acknowledges. He recognizes that housework is not just about keeping things clean, it is about sharing the responsibility of a life built together. Small gestures can make all the difference. A simple thank you for always taking care of this can transform how she feels about her efforts. A husband who says, "I'll do the dishes tonight" before she even asks has already lightened her load. And when he starts to see the unseen, when he picks up on the little things that make a home function, the invisible tasks she has managed alone for so long, she no longer feels alone in this work. There is also an opportunity to find mindfulness in daily tasks. To turn housework from a chore into a practice of presence. Instead of seeing dishes as something that must be rushed through, one can take a moment to feel the warm water. To appreciate the act of creating order from chaos. Instead of dreading folding laundry, one can see it as a quiet moment of care. A reminder of the simple comforts of home. In this way, even the most mundane tasks can become an offering of love. A way of being present not just for the household, but for each other. A marriage is not built on grand gestures alone. It is built in the smallest, quietest acts of care. Who notices? Who steps in? Who carries the weight? And whether that weight is shared. A home is not just four walls, it is a reflection of love, effort, and partnership. And when housework is no longer seen as her responsibility but as theirs, something shifts. The resentment fades. The balance is restored. And what remains is a love that feels lighter, freer, and truly shared. 4. Growing spiritually while the partner remains stagnant. She never expected to feel this way. In the early years of their marriage, they were growing together, building a life side by side. They faced challenges. They celebrated victories. And through it all, they felt like a team. But as time passed, something inside her began to shift. It was not a sudden change, not a dramatic realization, but a quiet longing that grew stronger with each passing year. She wanted more, not more possessions, not more status, but more depth, more meaning. More experiences that expanded her understanding of the world and of herself. She found herself drawn to books she had never read before, to ideas she had never considered. She wanted to learn, to explore, to step outside of routine, and discover new ways of thinking, new ways of living. At first, she thought he would come along on this journey with her. After all, they had always done things together. But when she excitedly shared a new book, he barely glanced at it. When she talked about a workshop she wanted to attend, he dismissed it as unnecessary. When she suggested traveling somewhere new, his response was the same: why change what's comfortable? She understood his perspective. Comfort was safe. Familiarity was easy. But what she struggled with was the feeling that while she was moving forward, he was staying in place. It was not about superiority or judgment, it was about longing for connection, for shared experiences that went beyond the mundane routines of everyday life. And so, the distance between them grew, not because they stopped loving each other, but because they no longer saw the world in the same way. He was content with things as they were. While she felt like she was outgrowing the marriage itself, she still cared for him deeply. But she could not ignore the quiet loneliness of walking a path alone when she had once imagined they would walk it together. Buddhism teaches that impermanence, anicca, is the nature of all things. Nothing in life remains static, people change. Emotions shift. Relationships evolve. Growth is natural and inevitable. And resisting it only leads to suffering. A marriage that does not embrace change will not remain the same, it will slowly wither, leaving two people side by side but worlds apart. Yet, so many couples resist growth because they fear what it might mean. They fear that if one person changes too much, the relationship will no longer work. But real love is not about keeping each other the same, it is about supporting each other's evolution. It is about seeing a partner's growth not as a threat, but as something beautiful, something that can enrich the relationship rather than weaken it. For a marriage to thrive, both partners must be willing to evolve. This does not mean they must share identical interests or pursue the same path. But it does mean they must honor each other's journey. A husband who truly loves his wife does not dismiss her curiosity, he encourages it. He does not hold her back from exploring new ideas, he celebrates her desire to grow. And in doing so, he opens himself up to growth as well. Encouraging mutual expansion can take many forms. It might mean reading a book together and discussing it over coffee. It might mean trying something new, a class, a meditation practice, a spiritual retreat. It might mean simply listening, truly listening, when she shares something that excites her, even if it is unfamiliar to him. The goal is not to force identical interests, but to create space for each other's passions to exist within the relationship. At the same time, a woman on a journey of growth must also practice compassion. It is easy to become frustrated when a partner resists change, to see their reluctance as stubbornness rather than fear. But true transformation happens not through force, but through patience and understanding. Rather than trying to push him forward, she can invite him, in gentle ways, to see the world through her eyes. Avoiding attachment to the past is also essential. Many couples cling to an outdated version of their relationship, trying to recreate the dynamic they had years ago rather than embracing the evolution of who they have become. But love is not about holding on to what was, it is about choosing each other again and again, even as you change. A marriage should not be a place where growth is stifled, it should be a place where growth is nurtured. It should be a safe space where both partners feel free to explore new ideas, new dreams, and new parts of themselves without fear of losing the relationship in the process. The beauty of this journey is that it is never too late to start. A couple that has spent years in stagnation can choose today to step into something new. The first step may be small, a conversation, an open mind, a willingness to see each other differently. But even the smallest step toward growth is a step toward deeper connection. A woman does not seek growth because she is unhappy. She seeks it because she knows that life is vast, that there is always more to learn, to experience, to become. And a husband who loves her will not fear this, he will walk beside her. Not because he has to, but because he chooses to. Because true love does not hold a person in place, it walks with them as they grow. 5. The decline of physical and emotional intimacy. There was a time when a simple glance could send warmth through her body. When his touch, even the lightest brush of his hand against hers, carried meaning. There was a time when their nights were filled with closeness. Not just in the physical sense but in the way they felt safe within each other's presence. There was laughter in the kitchen, whispered words before sleep, the natural instinct to reach for one another, not out of duty, but out of desire. But time has a way of dulling things that once felt effortless. Life layers itself over passion, responsibilities, exhaustion, routine. Intimacy, once abundant, becomes an afterthought. They still sleep in the same bed, still share the same space, but something is missing. She does not feel unseen because of his actions alone, but because she no longer sees herself in the way she once did. She no longer feels desired. No longer feels like the woman she was when he couldn't keep his hands off her. It is not that she needs constant reassurance, but there is something deeply human about wanting to be wanted. At first, she tells herself it is normal, that love naturally shifts as years pass. She tells herself that passion fades and that marriage is about companionship. Not just chemistry, but in the quiet moments. She wonders if he still sees her the way he once did, if he still craves her touch, still finds her beautiful in the way he used to, and more than that. She wonders if he even notices the space that has formed between them, the space where desire once lived. He, too, has felt the shift, though he may not know how to name it. The man who once reached for her without thinking now hesitates, unsure of whether she wants him in the same way she once did. And so, out of fear of rejection or simple complacency, he pulls back. And the more he pulls back, the more distant she becomes. The more distant she becomes, the more he assumes she is fine without the intimacy they once shared. This is how love fades, not in a single dramatic moment, but in the accumulation of small silences, of missed chances to connect. Buddhism teaches that there are two kinds of love: tanha, craving/attachment, and metta, unconditional love. A love built on tanha is one rooted in need, in desire that depends on circumstances staying the same. When youth fades, when bodies change, when life interrupts the passion that once felt limitless, this type of love begins to wither. But metta, the deeper kind of love, is based on compassion, on truly seeing and cherishing another person, not just for their physical form but for their essence, their soul, their being. Intimacy is not just about touch, it is about presence. It is about feeling close even when there is no physical closeness. It is about the way he looks at her when she is not expecting it, the way he listens when she speaks, the way she feels warmth in his presence even when words are not exchanged. When a relationship loses intimacy, it is not always because attraction has disappeared, it is because connection has. And that connection, once lost, can feel impossible to rebuild. But intimacy is not something that is either there or gone. It is something that can be nurtured, something that can be reignited with intention. The mistake many couples make is assuming that passion must return in grand, sweeping gestures. But true intimacy is built in the smallest moments: the hand that lingers a little longer than necessary, the thoughtful compliment that reminds her she is still seen, the simple act of sitting close, of reaching out, of making an effort not because it is required, but because it is desired. There is power in small, intentional acts of love. A soft touch on the lower back while passing in the kitchen, a note left on the pillow, a moment of eye contact that lasts just long enough to remind her that she is still the woman he fell in love with. These gestures may seem insignificant, but they are the foundation of rekindled intimacy. They are the reminders that love is still present, that connection is still possible. But beyond action, there is also the importance of mindful affection, the ability to be present in moments of closeness. In long-term relationships, physical touch can become routine, something done out of habit rather than feeling. But what if every kiss, every hug, every touch was approached with presence? What if, instead of rushing through these moments, couples allowed themselves to fully experience them? For some, this may mean learning to be vulnerable again, to express the longing that has been buried beneath years of routine. It may mean honest conversations, not about what is missing, but about what is still there. what can still be built for others. It may mean seeing intimacy beyond just the physical, finding connection in the quiet spaces of everyday life. In shared laughter, in deep conversations, in the simple act of choosing each other over and over again. Intimacy, at its core, is not about age or circumstance. It is about energy, presence, and effort. It is about seeing each other not just as partners in life, but as lovers, as souls who are still capable of deep connection. It is about refusing to let time turn love into mere companionship. Because while companionship is beautiful, love is meant to be felt. A woman does not crave intimacy because she needs constant validation. She craves it because she wants to feel alive in her relationship. She wants to know that, despite the passing years, she is still seen, still wanted, still deeply cherished. And a husband, when he allows himself to be present, when he lets go of fear or complacency, will find that intimacy is not something that simply fades with time. It is something that can be cultivated. Something that can grow even deeper if both people are willing to meet each other again. Because true intimacy is not just about being physically close, it is about making the conscious choice to stay emotionally close, no matter how many years have passed. 6. Retirement changes everything, not always for the better. There was a time when their days were structured. When the rhythm of life was dictated by schedules, responsibilities, and routines that seemed to stretch endlessly into the future. Mornings were rushed. Evenings were brief. And weekends felt like a blur of obligations and fleeting moments of rest. Through it all, they looked ahead to retirement as a promised reward, the golden years where time would finally be theirs to enjoy, free from the pressures that had defined so much of their lives. But when that time finally arrived, it did not unfold the way they had imagined. Instead of peace, there was an unsettling stillness. Instead of freedom, there was uncertainty. He had spent decades identifying himself through his work, through the sense of purpose and validation that came with it. Now, without it, he felt unmoored. The structure that had given his days meaning was gone, and in its place was a void he did not know how to fill. At first, he enjoyed the novelty of having nowhere to be, no deadlines to meet. But soon, the absence of purpose became louder than its presence had ever been. And without realizing it, he turned to her, to his wife, his lifelong partner, to become the center of his world. He expected her to fill his days, to be his companion in every moment, to provide the sense of direction he had lost. But she had spent years looking forward to this phase of life for a different reason. After decades of managing a household, raising children, supporting his career, she had imagined retirement as her chance to finally breathe, to rediscover herself beyond the roles she had played for so long. She wanted time for her own pursuits, for hobbies she had set aside, for friendships she had not nurtured as much as she wanted to. And now, instead of feeling free, she felt suffocated. She loved him. She had always loved him. But she was not meant to be his sole source of purpose. Nor should she be. And yet, she did not know how to tell him this without hurting him, without making him feel even more adrift than he already did. Buddhism teaches that suffering often comes from attachment to roles, to identities, to expectations that no longer serve us. Dharma, or one's life purpose, does not end when a career ends. It simply shifts. Retirement is not an empty space, it is a new beginning. A chance to embrace different forms of engagement, to cultivate new interests, to contribute in ways that go beyond professional identity. But many men do not see it this way. They see retirement as the end of something, rather than as the beginning of something new. And in doing so, they inadvertently place pressure on their marriages, unknowingly creating tension where there should be ease. The solution is not to pull away from each other, but to expand beyond each other. Separate hobbies, friendships, and self-development are not signs of disconnection, they are signs of balance. A husband who finds fulfillment outside of his wife, through hobbies, through friendships, through meaningful pursuits, becomes a man who is whole, rather than one who is dependent. And when both partners have their own sense of purpose, they are able to come back to each other not out of need, but out of love. A marriage thrives when there is both togetherness and individuality. Retirement does not mean a couple must spend every waking moment side by side. In fact, the healthiest relationships are the ones where both people continue to grow as individuals while still choosing to walk through life together. Encouraging this growth means letting go of expectations, the expectation that a wife should always be available, the expectation that a husband should know how to navigate this new chapter effortlessly. It means having honest conversations about what each person wants from this stage of life, about how to balance togetherness with independence, about how to support each other without feeling like one's happiness depends solely on the other. It also means finding new ways to engage with the world. Service, meditation, personal projects, these are all ways to cultivate fulfillment. Volunteering, mentoring, learning something new, engaging in creative pursuits, each of these provides a sense of purpose that does not fade with age. In Buddhism, the concept of Dharma is not tied to a job title, it is tied to how we contribute to the world, how we continue to grow and serve even as life shifts. For a woman who feels burdened by the weight of her husband's newfound dependence, the key is not to retreat in frustration, but to gently guide him toward his own path. She can encourage him to explore things he has never had time for, to reconnect with passions he once had, to see retirement not as an end, but as a transition. And for a man who feels lost without his career, the key is to embrace curiosity, to allow himself the freedom to evolve rather than to remain stagnant. Retirement, when approached with intention and awareness, can be a deeply fulfilling chapter of marriage. It can be a time of rediscovery, of new adventures, of deeper companionship that is not based on obligation but on choice. But that can only happen if both partners allow themselves to grow. Separately and together. A woman does not want to spend her retirement feeling like she is carrying the weight of her husband's happiness. And a man does not want to feel like he has lost his sense of worth. The answer is not in clinging to the past, but in creating a future that is rich, balanced, and full of purpose. Marriage is not just about being together, it is about growing together, in every stage of life. And when both partners understand that, retirement does not feel like an end. It feels like a new beginning. Love is not lost in one defining moment. It does not disappear in an instant. Nor does it break apart in a single fight. Love fades quietly, in the spaces where attention once lived, in the conversations that never happened, in the moments that were taken for granted. It slips away in the silence, in the unmet glances, in the assumption that love will always be there, waiting. But love is not something that waits, it must be nurtured, chosen, and given life every single day. A marriage is not a story that is written once and then left to unfold on its own. It is rewritten in the way you wake up next to each other each morning, in the way you speak or choose not to speak, in the way you reach for one another, not just in times of ease, but in times of distance. Love is not a passive emotion, it is an active commitment. A daily choice to see each other, to hear each other, to be present. The beauty of love is that just as it can fade, it can also be rekindled. A relationship that has grown distant does not have to remain that way. A connection that feels lost can be found again, not through grand gestures or perfect words, but through the small, consistent moments that remind you why you chose each other in the first place. It happens in the way you listen with intention, in the way you appreciate what once went unnoticed, in the way you make space for each other's growth rather than fearing it. Buddhism teaches that love is not about possession or attachment, but about compassion, presence, and understanding. To truly love someone is to see them as they are, not just as they were in the beginning, but as they evolve over time. It is about embracing change together, rather than resisting it. It is about letting go of expectations and learning to love each other in the present moment, over and over again. So if your marriage feels like it has settled into silence, if the warmth has dimmed, if the distance between you feels wider than it once did, know this: it is never too late to turn toward each other again. It is never too late to listen with fresh ears, to touch with renewed tenderness, to choose love, not out of obligation, but out of intention. Love does not thrive in perfection, it thrives in effort. It is found in the quiet spaces, in the knowing glance, in the small acts of kindness that say I see you, you matter to me. It is in the way you show up, even when it is easier to withdraw. It is in the way you forgive, not because you have to, but because you want to keep moving forward together. What is one thing you can do today to bring more love, more presence, more warmth into your relationship? It could be something as simple as putting down your phone when they speak, as small as a thoughtful touch, as meaningful as telling them, I appreciate you. Share your thoughts in the comments. What resonated with you the most? What do you believe is the key to keeping love alive over time? I would love to hear your insights. And if this video spoke to you, if it reminded you of something important, share it with someone who might need to hear it too. Thank you for spending this time here with me. May your relationships be filled with understanding, with kindness, and with the kind of love that only deepens with time. Until next time, take care of each other, and choose love every single day.